If you knew me before, you wouldn't even look my way. If I had the nerve to speak, you wouldn't hear what I say. Time has come and gone so fast, we're not who we used to be.
And welcome back to Sullivan's Unheard Voices. I'm here with Lauren and with Shawn. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I'm so glad we can continue the conversation we had before because it was one of those amazing conversations, and I'm still kicking myself for the audio portion of that because I was like, oh, it was so beautiful. It was like the best podcast I remember ever. And the reason I would also wanted to have you back is because I can't stop thinking about this topic. Because the more I talk to you and the more you see the reality of what life is after prison, the fact that the only person I'm hearing this is from you and a small group of other people that are passionate about this issue. But we're talking about lifelong impacts of people that have been the subject of an incarceration system that is built to discriminate against them. So I think I want to circle back to the conversation we had because I want a better version that sort of captures how you came to the Rebel Academy in the first place.
Yeah, so I mean, I think to your point, and before I jump into answering that, I'll just address that last time we did this, we had Tim Tipton, who is sort of the longest term tutor I've worked with and is sort of the main tutor because he's been around the longest for the Rebel Academy. But today I'm joined by Shawn Nelson, who is also, he was also a tutor at Larch, similar to Tim, although he came after Tim, and has been working for the Rebel Academy for a couple months now as well, and is more familiar with a couple different programs. So I just wanted to introduce him because he is new and was not part of the conversation before. But how I landed on the Rebel Academy was a multifaceted process, but really quite organic because working on the inside, I got to see every day the frankly heroic work that these guys and women in women's facilities, though I didn't work with women inside, do on a daily basis as peer tutors, often volunteers. Shawn was a volunteer. He actually had a different paid job inside and just wanted to pay it forward as a tutor, and so would come in at night after working all day for Department of Natural Resources, doing hard manual labor, to come in and tutor algebra to people. And so that to me completely negates the stereotype of what a felon is, of what an inmate is, of what a con is. When we hear those terms, we don't think empathy. We don't think paying it forward. We don't think service. We don't think algebra. We don't think helping each other, right? Or thinking about like, what can I give somebody else? We think the opposite of those things. We think selfishness and violence and animalistic behaviors. And what I got to see every day was the opposite, right? So when I lost my job and the prison closed, I was laid off from my position. I was so attached to this work and so adamantly committed to bringing visibility and validity to the work of the tutors inside prisons, because it's not just at Larch where this happens. This is something that happens in prisons everywhere. It's just a matter of how formalized it is. And of course, people on the outside don't know. Like, why would you know? Why would you know about people tutoring each other inside prisons because algebra is hard? It's just not a thing that would reach the mainstream for any particular reason. And so that became part of the cause. It was, okay, I'm no longer inside. What can I do to perpetrate this work and bring attention to it? And it was sort of naturally like, well, duh, let's just do the same thing we were doing on the inside, but do it on the outside for the same people. So people leaving prison who don't have a GED or high school credential are often still trying to get one and don't really know how to navigate that. And Tim had been released for a couple years. And we had spoken at some conferences, and I know he was doing really well, finishing his bachelor's degree. I said, hey, do you want to keep tutoring and actually make real dollars instead of 42 cents an hour to do this? He's like, hell yeah. I think he said something more vulgar than that. But, I was like, of course he did. And hey, do you want to talk about it in public? And do you want to kind of share what this meant to you on the inside and why it's kept you out of trouble on the outside? He's like, all day. Same thing with Chris Randon, who was on our board for a while and was the first tutor that I worked with inside Large. Same thing. Do you want to come talk about this? Do you want to be involved? Absolutely, yes. It literally saved my life. Those are his words. And so Shawn contacted me through her contact at Clark College, or his contact at Clark College. It was Hannah, who also works for us. And how do I get a hold of Ms. Z? Like, I'm off parole now. I think I want to tutor some more. Is that a thing I can do? And why, yes, it is. In fact, I will only take folks who did time because that's our mission, right? So it came about because of what I got to see and be a part of on the inside every day. It is really just an extension of the work we were doing that couldn't be visible by its very nature. And now it is very much visible and very much intentionally sort of in your face. Like, hey, we're here and we matter too, and we're trying to make it too. And we need people to see that folks coming out of prison aren't all just chomping at the bit to do more crime, right? Like, that's actually usually not the case.
And you bring up a good point, and it's one of the things that I wanted to highlight in our conversation today, is because if you take away people's opportunity to grow and take away opportunities to thrive after they've served their time, they've paid their price to society, right? I hate that term because I think the whole system is jacked up the way it is. But if we do have this even firm as a society that says, okay, you've been punished, you've successfully completed, why can't we help people move on and become successful? Because the more we can help people become successful across the board, the more we all benefit as a society. And the part that was surprising to me when I spoke to you last is just about how much pushback you get sometimes with this conversation. And so, like, why is the education piece so important to success post?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily, and I'm going to sound like a hypocrite saying this. I don't think it's necessarily that a GED is this like magic wand that like, okay, now all of a sudden you're smart. Like, now all of a sudden you're smart enough to like make it in society. Like, the GED, am I allowed to cuss, by the way? Okay. The GED is bullshit. It's a bullshit test. For example, I was having this conversation, I think last night with you. The English test, for example, the reading language arts, is 3 sections. There's a reading comprehension section, some grammar, punctuation, commonly confused words section, and an essay. I had a student in county jail write "fuck you" for his essay portion, and he passed the test. Because the essay doesn't matter. It's not graded. It's I shouldn't say that. It's graded, but it's weighted so little that if you pass the other sections, you literally don't have to write anything on the essay and you can pass the test. Now, what's one of the most important skills in a workplace and in school and in life in general? Writing. Writing and being able to articulate yourself, which clearly I'm struggling to do, without the use of AI or a robot or Alexa or whatever, is a skill that's very much needed. Communication is one of the things that employers are like, you have to be able to communicate effectively. You have to be able to communicate with customers. You have to be able to communicate when there's a problem. Writing is just a form of communication, and it's very important. And yet the GED just says, meh, if you can answer these trick questions about some fiction piece or about a newspaper article that's not relevant to your life, you can pass this test. So, in my opinion, and all of these are my opinions, right? It's not that the GED itself is like this biblically important magical tool that's just going to fix your life. But knowing and feeling, especially coming out of prison where you were forced to sit in a GED class, and I want to give Shawn the microphone to answer this too. When you were, their rhetoric, I was forced to sit in a GED class for 10 years because the state of Oregon or the state of Washington mandates that I participate in that class until I either finish a GED or until I go to the hole or until I get released. So they sit in classrooms and spin their wheels and can't pass the test, and they're trying and they're trying and they're trying, and they come out. And so, okay, I already know the test is bullshit because I've seen it. I know it inside and out. I can't seem to pass it for whatever reason. And getting students to understand that you need to get through it in spite of that fact, right? Yes, you're never going to use quadratic formula. You just want to get this done so your parole officer gets off your back and maybe you can go to a trade school and become an electrician, whatever, right? You're never going to use 80% of the math you see on that math test. You should learn how to write. That's actually important, but we're going to skip that part for GED because you don't actually need to write anything. The whole thing is just this one size fits a few, and students feel that, especially corrections students and inmate students and reentry students. And so part of what the tutors do and what they do so well is to show people, I'm not trying to convince you that this test is a magic wand, right? I'm not trying to convince you that learning statistics and pre-calculus is going to matter in your life. I know you've heard 17,000 teachers tell you, like, well, one day it's going to matter because maybe you want to be a scientist. And you're like, I'm not going to the moon, lady. I just want to make a living wage and like raise my kids and maybe have food, you know? And so the tutors are really effective at, it's not about the math. It's never about the math. This is about facing things that are hard. And that's what the GED becomes sort of a vehicle for our students is, I'm going to get through this in spite of the fact that it's nonsense. I'm going to get through this because nobody thinks I can, because society has already told me that I won't, because everybody expects me to do the opposite and go sell drugs on the corner and run from the cops and go back to prison. I'm going to do this because it's the last thing that people think I will do. And that becomes the reason. And when you can conquer something that you've already been told is not for you, now you start to see your own potential. Now you start to step into an identity as something other than criminal, inmate, piece of shit, whatever people have labeled you your whole life. That's why it's so important. It's not because you need to know quadratic formula. I could give a shit if you know quadratic formula, but I give a shit that you believe that you can be somebody else. And often the math in particular becomes the vehicle that gets students to see that.
And then Shawn, for yourself, like, what was that like when you were sort of like, because were you in that position where you were kind of like forced to choose between like GED and the whole kind of thing?
Yeah, so they basically were like, "Oh, do you have a diploma? Do you have a GED?" And even if you say, "Yes, I have a diploma," or "Yes, I have a GED," they have to verify it. So they'll still stick you in these classes, even if you do have one, right? If you haven't been to a prison in Washington before where they verified it, you have to go through this process. And so I got stuck in the class, and Misty's like, "Oh, well, here, take these practice tests. I mean, we can put you in, then we can put you in where you need to fit, like, depending on what your scores are." And I was like, "Okay." So I take the test, and then she's like, "Well, you're ready to pass the test. So why don't you just take the actual GED test, and then you don't have to sit in these classes?" It's like, "Okay, cool." Everybody else is struggling, like they're having a difficult time. And I mean, I'm not the smartest of person, right? It's a lot of it is common sense, but when you're in a place where you don't want to be and it's hard to focus anyways, they'll read the article and then they don't even know what they read because they're so frustrated and irritated that they can't focus. And if you have maybe ADD or you've used a lot of drugs in your life, it's going to cause memory and attention problems, right? And I got lucky where I still have a pretty good attention span and I can pay attention. And so, like she said, a lot of people, the test isn't like, oh, if you pass this test, you're super smart, right? But these tests is designed in a way to make it extremely difficult, and it causes a lot of anxiety. And so people get scared of taking the test and they just sit in these classes, and then they get in trouble on purpose because they don't want to sit in these classes.
And I want to ask a question I know the answer to, and it may sound like a ridiculous question, but I think people need to hear this, right? The entire time that you were in, did you ever feel like they were caring or compassionate, or not even that? Did you ever feel like they were really wanting you to go through some sort of rehabilitation process?
Not really.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everybody in the prison system is bad. There was actually some really cool individuals. I had a sergeant that really helped me out when I had a mental breakdown. And he was like, here, let me get you a job. Let me get you out of your cell. So, you know, you don't have to sit here, right? Instead of throwing you in the hole like half the other people would have done just for fun, right? Because I mean, a lot of people there, they just like to hold power over people, and it's makes it a tough environment, you know. And so most people there, they don't want to see you succeed. They want to keep you there, or they like to try to push your buttons so you get in trouble and then you stay there longer or you go to the hole. It's just it's very stressful, and it's not a rehabilitating environment at all.
And then once you start sort of like this path and you go down sort of like the GED path and the education piece, at what point did you sort of shift your thinking into saying, you know, this is something I could do?
Well, initially it was just kind of like it gets me out of the unit, right? The GED or the education building in itself, you couldn't even go in there unless you were wearing tucked in pants and all this stuff. There was all these extra rules, but there was not the same amount of guards. It was more like, okay, this is education. I get to kind of escape this little prison world for a little while here around books and people trying to learn sometimes, right? Not everybody's there to learn. Some people are there just because they have to be, but you know, it's just a much better atmosphere than being in the unit where you have guards walking down every 15-20 minutes, walking their keys jingling, your anxiety going up. They're trying to get you in trouble. When your education, they come in the room maybe once an hour just to look, and then they are quiet. They don't really do anything, just leave. So it's a much more relaxed environment, and it just was easier for me to spend my time there.
And what did it mean to you to have like an in-person tutor that was like a peer
So
process?
I never ended up having a tutor.
Interesting. Okay.
I passed all my tests first try, and I think the first 2 weeks I was there. So
Which is like unheard of, by the way. Like he's one in maybe 150 students that I've ever had. That sometimes students will come into a prison ready, but he was an anomaly. So he didn't need any tutoring. It was quite the opposite. It was not only should you pass all these like within a week when we can get you tested, but would you stay in tutor because you're that smart compared to some of the folks, and we need help. So he didn't need a tutor.
I appreciate that the extra context. And so, like, what was it like then once you sort of like passed the test and you started that path of being a tutor?
well, in the beginning, it was very weird, right? People were coming up to me going, "Hey, youngster, are you that guy that does the teaching around here?" You know, and I'm like, "What?" Like, no, and then, or then, you know, people recognize that, hey, this person's willing to donate their time to help me get this done. Especially once we opened up High School Plus, things were a little bit different where people are like, hey, I want to do this or whatever, GED, I need to pass quadratics. I've been doing this forever. I hear you explain things maybe a little bit differently than this other tutor. And when that happened, like barriers came down. I had people that would ordinarily never talk to me because I'm a different race and I'm not gang related, anything like that, and that would come up to me and ask me for help with math or with their because you have college classes too, and they would have college stuff where even though I'm not in that class, they would still, hey, will you help me with this? Because I know you're fairly smart, you know, and it's like, okay, like, when am I gonna turn down somebody when there's nothing else in my mind, there was nothing better else to do.
And one of the things that I'm curious about, so to sort of go back to you, Lauren, for a second, because what you talked about the writing piece just sort of hit home to me so much, because the pathway to jobs right now is through online. And if you don't know the verbiage to use or the language to use when you're applying for even basic entry level jobs, you're not going to get those jobs. And so this concept of we're teaching people towards a test that doesn't help facilitate a, living wage job seems almost like a slap in the face.
Yeah, and I mean, so to clarify one little point that, every employer, not every employer, but any legit employer where you have any growth potential is usually going to look for a high school equivalency. So the GED does serve that purpose, right? It's the same thing. It carries the same weight as a high school diploma in the eyes of employers and colleges for financial aid. GED is almost universally in the United States. There's only a few states that don't recognize or use GED as their means of determining whether you are worthy of a high school credential. So in that way, you get your GED. Okay, it can open doors. It can be a springboard. But what you actually spend your time learning to get the GED doesn't necessarily translate to job skills, right? The one thing that I've seen probably unanimously in students is their capacity to grow their capacity to deal with things in their life that are difficult. That's a job skill, right? You might have a boss that tells you, I need you to go do this task, and you don't understand why you're being asked to do that. It's not something you normally do. Usually somebody else does it. Are you being punished? Are you being tested? They're not giving you any further instructions. There's different ways you can react to that. You can get pissed off and punch a wall. You could quit. Those are behaviors that a lot of our students have expressed in their past lives, right? Like that's what gets them into trouble, is the lack of coping skills and the lack of tools to deal with stressful or difficult situations. Or when you're asked to be, like I have 3 kids at home, 10, 11, and 13. I ask them to do something. Why? That's not my chore. Why do I have to do? What do you mean? It becomes a 5-hour argument, and then they do it poorly on purpose to sabotage the chore. Like, ideally, we teach our kids out of those behaviors and get them to appreciate, like, sometimes you're going to be asked to do things you don't understand, like math, right? It's the same thing. And I remember being in 11th grade, sitting in a math class, being told I needed to learn, how to calculate a system of equations, a point at which 2 lines are intercepting. Why do I need to know this crap? I remember being pissed off. And eventually you learn, okay, like, I have to regulate my emotions. I have to learn how to get through this because I'm trusting that something better comes later. Like, these are the hoops I need to jump through. So that's a skill. That's a skill that employers want to see, that I can ask you to do a task and I can trust that you can say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And if you don't know how to do it, that you also know how to communicate that you need some clarification or some training around that, right? But not to throw a tantrum, punch a wall, and leave the work site, or go gossip about it or talk about your boss in some way that's negative, or, whatever. So it does teach you that. But I think that in states where the GED is the only option, as it is in Oregon, almost across the board, GED is almost the only option. There's a few exceptions for younger students, depending on school districts, or that are very expensive if you want to pay tuition dollars to finish a diploma. When GED is just sort of the blanket statement, like, well, you missed out on high school, so here's the thing you need to do, we're doing a lot of people a disservice. It is an inequitable approach to saying we're trying to help people lift themselves up by their bootstraps. You are failing most folks who didn't complete high school by offering only a GED, because the vast majority of those students are older individuals who are people of color, and the vast majority of the graduates are younger and they're white, and English is their first language. So when you have that disparity in student demographic compared to graduates, people aren't noticing that and asking, maybe there's a better way. Washington has a better way. Washington has High School Plus, which Shawn alluded to, and we could talk all about that even more, because that is a much more equitable and accessible means to complete a diploma, and it circumvents standardized testing like the GED, and it's far more effective, and students prefer it, and graduation rates are higher, and it's cheaper.
And I want to stress that test anxiety is a thing. And so when you have a test like the GED, which is written from the lens of the dominant male culture, and it is measuring the knowledge of the dominant male culture, it's sort of by design leaves a lot of people out of the conversation, especially if you didn't grow up knowing the right kinds of words. And really, it's like access to language, which is the most important thing that it sounds like they're completely missing. And correct me if I'm wrong too, but with the high school pluses, we were sort of talking about that yesterday. It could be that somebody just has like, you were saying, like, even a PE credit is the only thing standing between them and a diploma, but yet we're still having them go through this whole GED process, which is kind of a disservice in a way too, right?
Yeah, so in Washington State, High School Plus is a nomenclature specific to Washington State. What that is a high school diploma program. So you don't need any credits from high school. You could have gone to high school out of the country. We had a lot of students in that situation, or students who went to some sort of Job Corps or private alternative school, which had then closed, and getting their records was just impossible. They didn't exist anymore. So folks coming in with 0 credits who were in their 60s, I had students like that. I had students who were 22 and very recently remembered high school and had gotten through, including Shawn, actually, who had gotten through like most of senior year, and then like a tragedy struck, or somebody got pregnant, or somebody died in the family, or you moved, so whatever, and so they just weren't able to finish high school. So you could have the full gamut, and we had the full gamut. But the beautiful thing, there's several beautiful things to what you're talking about. One of the beautiful things about High School Plus is if you come in and your graduating class, you would have needed to earn 19 credits to graduate, which is the case before, like, I think it's 2014 and before, if that was your graduating class. And you earned 18 credits. So you were 1 credit shy. And let's say that 1 credit was in art. You forgot to go to ceramics second semester senior year, and therefore you didn't graduate because you stopped going to art class. So High School Plus says, okay, this student needs 1 art credit. It's 20 years later. You need 1 art credit to have earned your diploma. Let's put you into an art class. You finish the class with a C or better. We grade your work. Your credit's done. You earn your diploma. Done. Oregon says, oh, you don't have a high school education. You have to do a GED. There's 4 tests: English, math, social studies, science. Doesn't matter what you did in high school. Doesn't matter that you got all those credits. You're going to pay $44 a piece for each official test. And if you can't pass them, I don't know what to tell you. Keep trying, study harder, right? So you see how that's not, it's a one-size-fits-a-few model. Whereas in Washington, and I had students show up with half a credit of PE left. I'm like, cool, go to the gym, log your hours lifting weights, write a couple paragraphs about what exercise means to you. Those are the outcomes for the PE credit in Washington State per the state law. And you get your diploma. You don't have to take any GED tests because you already did 18 out of your 19 credits. And Shawn was one of the first tutors we had when we launched High School Plus at large. It didn't exist when I started there. It was GED only, which is why I got so fired up about like all of these inequities, right? Like I've seen it, especially in a prison classroom. And so Shawn became really familiar with High School Plus and would have these conversations with students about what's the difference. Can I do GED? Can I do High School Plus? What if I change my mind? What does the curriculum look like? What's the difference? The last thing I'll say is, to your point about who designed the GED and the kind of questions that are on there and the rhetoric that it uses, one of the most beautiful things about High School Plus, in my opinion, is that students had choices about what they wanted to read and study. So U.S. history doesn't say, well, you have to know all about the Constitution, then you have to know all about the presidents and how awesome they were, and then you have to know about World War I and II and Vietnam, the things I learned in high school, right? Like this very white male-centric sort of history. Oh, and by the way, Martin Luther King, and oh, by the way, Geronimo. Yay, heroes, okay? Now you know something about Native history. We checked that box, and we checked the Black history box. That was my high school experience. I went to a very good high school and got honors U.S. history. That's what I learned. Whereas I got to hand literature to my Black students when they asked about, can I read something maybe that pertains to me and like my culture and my history? And I'm like, read this, The Untold History of the United States. In the first chapter, I have this student, and he became a tutor too. His last name was Bovan. And he's reading about how Woodrow Wilson was a racist and screened Birth of a Nation in the White House, which resurrected the Ku Klux Klan. And he turns around and looks at me. He's like, am I allowed to read? Like, I'm reading about how a president was a racist piece of trash. I don't know I'm really into this, but I feel like I'm breaking the rules. And I'm like, no, I'm breaking the rules. Like, we're doing it this way, right? Which is sort of the rebellious spirit that led to the Rebel Academy's name. But I mean, I know Shawn is probably chomping the bit to talk about all of those things.
Please go ahead.
Well, when it comes to High School Plus, definitely the advantages are very clear. So she was saying, they're kind of GED and High School Plus are interchangeable as well, at least in Washington. So if you passed let's say, like for me, when I was in high school, the only reason why I didn't graduate, I was missing my last English credit because I didn't finish my senior project. I had most all my other credits. I took 2 math classes my sophomore year so I could do pre-calculus by my junior year. So I had all my math credit done by my sophomore year. I didn't even have to take math at that point. Just I find math, I don't know, interesting. I'm an odd one, I guess. So when it comes to something like that where you're only a few credits short, but let's say you have a good reading comprehension and you don't want to do all these other credits, you don't want to do all the English stuff. If you could pass the GED, right, the reading part, but maybe not the math part, well, you'll get all your English credits. And then if you already have your lower math credits already from high school, like your pre-algebra, algebra 1, which you only needed 2 math credits when I was in school, then you are able to not have to do the math test now, right? So it really kind of helps, or like if you've taken or passed some of the GED tests, you can also then say, well, I've never passed a math test. I've gotten all the other ones. Okay, well, then let's go ahead and then apply all those tests towards your high school diploma credits. And then we'll work on all of the math credits you need to get to pass your high school diploma. And then they're like, are you serious? I don't have to take the math test. And it's like them going from like having to almost like drag them down there every day to them being like, I want to get this done. I don't want to be in these classes anymore, because they know they don't have to take a test, right? That was 90%, I feel like, of the problem. Is even now I'm tutoring people, they can do all of the content, they take the test and they struggle. It's not the content, it's the test. And it's the time. They go, oh, I only have 3 minutes per question. I'm like, it's not about, don't think about how much you have per question. It stresses them out. The anxiety, everything comes out in the way that the test is designed to kind of stress people out. Makes it difficult.
And it's interesting to me because I think of like brain elasticity, right? And I think about like if it's been 15 years since you've taken trigonometry, you're going to have to start back at like math 101 or math 100 before you can get back to where you were in trigonometry. Because if you don't use it, you kind of lose it. And so this whole idea of like you're taking people that haven't been to school in 20 years, 15 years, their brain isn't conditioned for school anymore. And so you're fighting against the brain elasticity piece too. And so I would imagine like until you get back in the groove of things, it can be very difficult. And in that same regard, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this, like having that peer tutor that can teach you how to study, that can teach you how to read a test, because it's those unwritten things about education that if you're not guided along the way, you're having to relearn all of these things. And that's just not fair, I don't think.
Well, I feel like the thing I've learned to apply the most is we all have a background, right? We all have done something. Math is in everyday life. You just don't realize it. So my first day with somebody, I'm always like, well, what do you do for a living? What's this? Oh, you've laid brick, or you might have done flooring, or maybe plumbing, or maybe just landscaping, right? All of that has angles, degrees, it has slope, it has all these things. And so I try not to be like, hey, you got to start back at step 1, right? No, you know quite a bit, right? Let's start with what you know, build off of that, and then it makes it go much faster because they're not having to be like, oh, I need to learn division. I don't know how to do long division. You don't need to know how to do long division. You got a calculator, right? Like, don't worry about that. Let's go to the stuff that you know and build for your confidence from there, because passing the test, most of it is about having that confidence, right? To be able to say, no, not only can I do the material, but I know the material well enough that even when they ask me questions extremely worded, difficult on purpose, I can still figure it out and pull the information out and answer the question correctly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you want me to follow up with that since you're passing me the microphone. Like, I'll take the hint. Yeah, and I mean, I can't, as somebody who has taught GED for 15 years, I think now, in different contexts with monolingual Spanish speakers who are testing in Spanish, from older folks who've been locked up for a long time, younger folks. I also work for a local community college in a GED program, so working with 16 to 20-year-olds, so very recently in school, and usually coming in ready, like Shawn did, to pass at least a few tests. They're pretty close, like scoring in the 148s, 150s. You need a 145 on all the tests to pass it. One of the biggest parts of my job in that role and as an instructor before has been just convincing students that they are ready, because they'll pass practice tests and they're like, but I guessed and I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, your score says you know enough. And you have to remind students, again, like what I sort of started out this whole conversation with, that, this test it's BS in a lot of ways. You have to remind students, like, it's not actually testing how much you know about science. You can't go be a biologist when you pass the science test. Like, nobody's assuming that, you're now this wizard in chemistry, physics, and astronomy, because all of those things are touched on the GED test. It's just a stupid speed bump right now in your life. That's it. If it shows that you have the shocks and the wheels required to get over this speed bump, that you will physically make it over, just take the test. If you're interested in learning about you really want to learn science and you really want to understand what the stupid diagram of a cell is on this question 5 on the test, whatever it looks like. Okay. Once this is done and you don't have the anxiety that Shawn's talking about, and you're not constantly, like, I have had students tell me they have nightmares about algebra. I had a student tell me at large that when he got shipped, they call it shipped in prison, when he got shipped from the intake facility to Coyote Ridge, which is a no joke big prison in eastern Washington, that, you ride in on the bus and you see the fence and you're going through and there's inmates on the yard and it's scary, right? He's like, I'm going to have to fight somebody. I don't know what to expect. Am I going to have to join a gang? I don't know. I've never been to prison before. All the fear and anxiety that comes with going to prison. And he told me he was in class and he'd passed all the tests except for math. And he's like, I am more terrified of this math test than I was on that bus showing up at Coyote Ridge. This is a student's words. I can't make this up, right? Like, I didn't like math either, but I didn't have this level of anxiety, right? And he gave up going to work release. He opted not to get released from prison so that he could stay longer and finish this test, because he said it would haunt him until he actually got it done. So he stayed in prison to confront this fear of algebra and pass this test. Like, I still get goosebumps telling this story. This is 8 years ago. And he stayed and he graduated, and he cried, and it was just like the best possible thing you could expect for this man, right? But when you hear students talk about how deeply this affects their mental health while they're trying to convince themselves that they can even do it, even after they pass a practice test. I don't care what you know about science. I don't care that you're guessing on half the questions. Your score says you can take this test and pass it. And a lot of my job is having that exact conversation with the majority of my students at all ages, all backgrounds, all races. And I know that that's a lot of what Shawn does. It's like, you're ready. You can do. I see that you're doing this, and it's okay if you fail it too. Like, if you fail it, that gives us a baseline. We try again.
Yeah, and I like the point you brought, that the piece that I would like to sort of like to back up and sort of talk about that sort of shift, because I would imagine you're also combating a lifetime of people telling you that you're not good enough, that you're not smart enough. And so when you get into these situations, and that situation is not the right word, when you get into this sort of environment and you start to finally believe in yourself, it opens the door to so much more opportunity. Was there a part along the way where you started to like believe in yourself more because of this path that you've taken?
So at first, not so much, right? It's kind of subtle. It wasn't until I was doing it. Originally, I just did it to get out of the unit, right? Oh man, it's just nice not to be sitting in here. And there's extra benefits. If the cops see you down there all the time, they don't bug you because, you're in the education building, right? So, but when so the first person I helped graduate came up to me and was like so excited in the unit, and he was like shaking my hand, and it was just like, this feels really good. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. And then it gave me the excitement and the motivation to want to learn more so I could help more people with other subjects. And now I feel like it's kind of just become like learning and the excitement. Like I spend an hour every day watching some kind of scientific or math video just for fun to keep learning, to also incorporate it with my working with people, to try to always be learning new things and incorporating new things, to try to everybody has different backgrounds, different fears, different learning limitations, or how they learn. There's different styles, and so um being in education, it's like this is the only job I've ever had that I enjoy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mind going to work for the first time in 35 years. So, like I'm 36, and ever since I was a kid and had chores, I hated it. And this is the first job where it's like, man, if I miss work, I'm like, oh man, I didn't even, that wouldn't have been so bad today, like,
I think that's awesome. And so, like, one of the things that we sort of touched on last time too, that I kind of wanted to circle back, was this whole concept of, because like you keep hearing it all the time, of like all of the barriers once people are released, and the biggest barrier is, how do you find sustainable employment? And it's one of those interesting barriers because it's based on a lot of stereotypes and a lot of myths about people who are being released. And how do you combat that?
I have an answer for that. So first of all, we as the Rebel Academy are stoked to be truly a second chance employer, which is what employers are called when they're willing to hire folks with a criminal record. But we only employ and pay tutors with felonies. So everybody who's on payroll did time, whether it was local county time. Most 5 out of 6 is federal or state time. So, big boy, big girl prisons. And for substantial amounts of time in some cases. Tim has done several different stints in both Oregon and Washington. And so I know that that's like a special exception because of my background, what we do. But one thing that we are doing, we are launching what we're calling the Coalition of Felon-Friendly Employers, which is coffee, conveniently, which is like necessary in my life. So it just seemed like a really good acronym. People can remember that. And we're going to formalize a group of local employers in the Portland metro area that want or already do employ folks coming out of corrections. And, you can find websites. There's these sort of shoddy websites that are thrown together like, oh, well, this list of places like Dave's Killer Bread and Walmart and like, some of the big box stores, like, they'll ask you, but like they'll tend to hire folks with a record, of Frito-Lay in Vancouver, and like some of the trades, some of the construction companies. We have some amazing partnerships developing, one of which is with Cartello Construction. Hope they don't mind me calling them out. But Mike, the owner there, is connected with my partner, Troy, who's a networking guru and runs Network in Action across Portland, and is very well connected to the business world, corporate community in lots of different ways. And he's obviously a big fan of the Rebel Academy and promotes us constantly and is talking about the work we're doing. And has really started to recognize that there's this wonderful match to be made, because a lot of these companies, such as Cartello Construction and other, especially blue collar like labor, have a really hard time right now finding and retaining quality staff. And yet here over at the Reentry Center, who we are partners with, and we go in and help folks who don't have a GED, we tutor on site, they're desperately looking for work that isn't McDonald's, no offense McDonald's, or any minimum wage, part-time job. And so Troy has seen this sort of like match that would just be perfect in like networking to bring these different groups together. And that's exactly what this coalition will serve to do. And Cartello, Mike came to the Reentry Center and gave an amazing speech. I mean, all these nonprofit partners who are not really corporate minded were just like holding their breath on the verge of tears. I think the director of the whole facility was, fighting back tears the whole time as he spoke about how he hired one of our students, and he's a Spanish speaker. So not only do we have a tutor going, but we also have a translator going to, translate into Spanish from English and vice versa. And he is just overwhelmed with how meaningful this has been to hire somebody out of reentry, how difficult it is because of the barriers that he sees his employees facing. Like, I can't use Zelle. I'm not allowed. I can't open a bank account. I can't secure housing. I'm commuting to this workplace, but I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight. And it's not for lack of trying. The housing is just as big of a barrier as the employment is. And so we are actively creating this coalition to intentionally bring screened, referable individuals who can, and we can plug them into jobs that they're allowed to do. If you're not allowed to use internet, okay, we know that. We can send you to these tables. We're going to host job fairs. We can do like a matching sort of service and bring in employers who are interested, but who are kind of sketched out at the idea of like, well, if I open up to like, well, we'll take folks with criminal backgrounds, like what does that mean? And how much research do I have to do? And how do I get a background check? And how do I know that their references are legit? It removes all of that stigma and all of those questions, because the individuals we're working with have caseworkers and parole officers, and we know everything about them. So we are not going to refer somebody who's not going to be a good fit, or who's still like sort of teetering on the criminal side of like, they're, not so sure they're ready to work at a cashier, or they're not so ready to work with customers, And so what that also does is removes all of the pressure and stigma from the applicant, because now everybody in the room knows you have a criminal background. We can just skip through that part of the interview. We already know that you did time. And that's when you talk about anxiety. Like, that's the other thing, is when you're trying to get a job and you go into the interview and you're like, when do I tell them that I did 7 years for, manslaughter or whatever? Like, how do you have that conversation? That's a whole separate, huge piece of training for a job interview. Where are you getting those skills? Where are you practicing that? So it makes it a lot easier for the employers, because we've screened everybody. We bring candidates to them, and it makes it easier for the applicants, because every applicant in the room has a criminal background. We can just skip that part. We skip that part completely. So we are working on that, Shawn. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
And that brings up a good point too, right? Because even through this screening, we're still recommending employees that would be a good fit for your company. So it's not like you're opening your doors, but we're throwing somebody in that's going to not serve you well as an employer, but that also doesn't serve well the person we're funneling towards you. And so there's that piece I think people need to sort of get past, because there is still going to be this level of, if they're a good fit personality wise, if they're a good fit work ethic wise, that is still on the table. That is still, but all we're doing is just removing a label.
And now we can just,
yeah.
That should be important.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that just kills me is when you have this conversation with people, and like you were saying with the housing piece and the job piece, most of the jobs for some of these companies, they automatically only give you 12 hours a week or 13 hours a week. They're not going to give you full time. And like, that doesn't do anybody any good. Like if you can't afford to feed yourself, like, that's not good enough, And so, like, and I'm curious from your perspective, like, how important was the stability piece when you got out?
Well, so I got out, released on the ankle monitor, and they said, well, you have a set amount of time or you go back to prison to find a full-time job. When I got released, my initial plan was to go to Clark College and go to school and finish doing some kind of degree. And my parole officer told me, no, I will send you back to prison if you don't work full-time and can pay your bill. So I got a job at a factory and worked 12.5-hour days, 60 to 72 days a week for a year and a half straight. So, And then they still wanted me to do classes, thinking for a change. You want to do drug treatment classes. You got your parole officer showing up at your work, giving you UAs. You have an ankle monitor on you. Everybody wants to ask you questions. Everyone wants to know why there's a uniformed officer with a gun walking through. There's a lot of things that make it very difficult as somebody, because you have to explain all these things to people, right? Every time, and everybody. And so I just learned that you just get it out first. And then if they don't like you, they don't like you. Like, because it's going to come up when they show up, and everybody's going to see, not just the employer. Every employee there is going to notice this. So it's not just the employer, it's the employees as well that also want to treat you differently because you're interrupting either the work or it's just a spectacle, So,
Well, it allows people to judge. And the other piece too that bothers me about the whole thing is it puts you in a position to where you have to relive your trauma every time you explain that crap.
yep,
And it's like, let's move on. It's been how many years? Like, come on, give
right.
me a break. But if the systems are that way, like you're kind of set up for failure, because like once that sort of nugget is in your coworker's mind, they kind of treat you differently, and you have to fight twice as hard to be just as successful.
No, and so where I worked, they actually hired four of us at one time with ankle monitors. Well, two got fired for different reasons. Well, they still kept two of us, and we ended up being the best two workers. In 1 year, I got promoted from being on the bottom to being the trainer for that entire position and being the maintenance on Sunday guy, because I had so much to prove, right? Nobody was going to let me slide. Everybody had their eye on me constantly. And so if I screw up just a little bit, or unlike everybody else, if maybe things aren't busy and I'm just standing on my phone, people are going to see that and report it in because they don't want me there. So you have to work twice as hard. And it's either going to make people or break people. And it's not fair for the people that want to be like everybody else and don't want to feel like they have to prove something, right? You shouldn't have to feel like that.
And you shouldn't have to follow rules that other people don't have to follow.
Mm.
Like it puts you in a position to where you have to do things that no other human being in that place have to do. And that's just, it's not sustainable. It's kind of fucked up, pardon my French, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, in the end, I did end up getting laid off, and they kept somebody that had been there 6 months less than me, and the only reason is that I could assume I was the last one left that was from that original group of people. So I was the only felon left there. They let me go, and they kept somebody that had only been there for 6 months, and I was the trainer of that position. So they said they had a downsize, but it makes no sense because I was way more experienced and had more time. But, so even when you do good, sometimes these negative things still will follow you, even when you follow all of the rules and you do really good. And that's how I ended up at the Rebel Academy, because I got laid off after working 60, 72 hours, pretty much living there for like a year, and, yeah, they just called me in one day and were like, sorry, this is your last day. Turn in your thing. We got to walk you out. They wouldn't even let me walk myself out because I'm a felon. So,
And that's just that frustrates me so much, because like I think about how hard I have to fight sometimes because I have a disability. And I equate it to sort of like a similar experience, because the moment you disclose that you have a disability, people treat you differently. You have this negative stigma that's attached to you because of something that is out of control or out of your ability. And that judgment piece is what just pisses me off so much, because like you have no idea what you went through to bring you here this day, right? Nobody knows your story. Nobody knows the reasons and everything that sort of led up to whatever the decision that was made. And so like the fact that you have this closed-minded view of things before even knowing anything, just, I don't know, it just makes me so mad.
Yeah, and I mean, we could address the elephant in the room too, right? Like, people listening or watching this are like, "But what did he do? But what did he do?" Like, that's always but that's something that this population has to constantly wrestle with, and they, like Shawn said, like, do I just out and say what it was? And I won't give details, but it was an accident. It was an accident. He didn't go looking to
How
stab
accurate.
somebody, or like, I mean, he'll tell a story. That's up to you. But I mean, if you don't know and you assume, like, okay, this is a violent person, or they were selling drugs, so they're a liar and they're manipulative and they're violent and they could hurt me, and I don't want to be in the same. I'm just going to stay over here. I got to kind of keep an eye on them because I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know that I want to know, because then I'll judge them even more. And don't get me wrong, and I remember saying this when I was on your show before, there are people in prison who have done some terrible, terrible things on purpose, who don't have regrets or kind of pretend like they do to get what they need while they're locked up, but they intend to go back and commit crimes. I have plenty of conversations with students even who are like, I'm going to get out and sell drugs. And I'm like, that is terrible. I don't want that for you, and I wish you hadn't told me that, and I have to write it down somewhere, but like, you already know all of that. And maybe you're just saying it to get a rise out of me, just to see how I react and waste my time. There's that too. But the vast majority of students I've worked with either have deep regret before I ever meet them about whatever it is that they did, and or they don't know how to change it. They don't know how to be anything else. And that's part of what education serves on the inside, is to help them figure that out. Shawn's case, it was an accident. And so if you don't know that and you just, well, what did he do? Like, he deserved some kind of something or other. Okay, like, when you don't understand the prison system and you don't understand how the criminal justice system works, basically what he just described sounds a lot like how Black people talk about being in workplaces sometimes, that I'm being treated differently because of fill in the blank with the thing. But it reminds me a lot of race, right? And that you're going to get looked at differently, and you're the first to get laid off, and you have to work twice as hard because you have something to prove, because everybody thinks you're incapable, or because you're a criminal, because you're Black, right? There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that too. And so why don't we talk about it for the reentry population? And a lot of people want to say, oh, well, because they did crime, like, because they're bad people. That's like, if you know Shawn's story, like, it might change your mind, right? And I had a lot of folks inside, tutors especially, who had accidents, and they showed up just dejected and feeling guilty, and they didn't want to talk about it because it was just upsetting to them, and they don't have any excuses, and they own what they did. They own their part, and they would love to move on. And here they are in prison, reminded every day of an accident, not just a mistake, an accident. And that's a big piece of it, right? And that stuff is just, it's heartbreaking for everybody involved. Everybody involved. And the only thing I'll say before you pick it up is, when you were asking him about, like, what did it take for him to kind of, like, what did it feel like to start tutoring, or where did it kind of turn? When Shawn came into my classroom, he was very much like, he didn't have a spark in his eye. He was hunched over, wouldn't really make eye contact. I think he wore a DNR hat, so his hat was always kind of pulled down. He's like, yeah, and he has kind of that monotone voice anyway, but it was like, yeah, I guess I'll do the math. I mean, he was depressed, and I could see it all over his face, all over his body language. I guess I'll pass math, like, I like it, so I'll just take it. When he started tutoring, his posture changed. He had energy. He started telling jokes. Like, look how blue his eyes are. He didn't look like that. He didn't look like that when I first met him. And in just a couple weeks when he started tutoring, you could physically see and hear a difference in how he carried himself, because he started to have self-worth again, or maybe for the first time or whatever, given what had happened in his past. And so tell me if I'm wrong, but I am thoroughly convinced that his capacity to deal with the shit he dealt with at his workplace had a lot to do with how he grew as a human, and had that humanity restored a little bit while he was inside, through the work that he chose to do in helping other people.
Yeah, because it's a system that's designed and built to dehumanize the people inside. And so I appreciate that aspect of it. And I would turn it over to you, Shawn, if you want to tell your story. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I'd only ever been arrested one time my entire life. Well, by the accident, I was like 30 years old at the time, but I'd only ever been arrested one time my entire life, possession of paraphernalia for a marijuana pipe, when I was 18 years old. Okay. Fast forward, almost 15 years. I'm 30, 31 when the accident happened. And my mom, she had stage 4 breast cancer, and they gave her 6 months to live. And so I helped take care of her. She made it 2 years. But when she died, I kind of went off the rails. I was depressed. I was taking some of her medications, got strung out on a bunch of, she was on everything. She had, and so I decided, okay, I don't want to live like this. This isn't good. And so my girlfriend at the time, she was like, "Well, look, I'll take care of you. We'll just stay home for a couple weeks." COVID had just hit, so we didn't know what's going on. So it's like, "We'll just stay at your house. I'll make sure you don't go." And I was like, "Okay." First time we want to leave in 2 weeks, she's like, "Let's go down to the dispensary and pick up some weed. You haven't been eating well. You need to eat some food." And I was like, "Okay," so we leave to go to the store. On the way back, a person tries to swerve into my lane coming down the street in Vancouver. It's a 3-lane road. They're in the middle lane. We're in the right lane. I'm going the speed limit. We have our seatbelts on, everything. We're just driving down the road, doing our own thing. And she says, "Look out." I look over. They're about to smash into us. I swerve, pop up on the curb. We hit a brick wall. All the airbags go off. She starts screaming. The car doesn't even stop. They just keep going. Okay. So people are like, "Oh, is everything okay?" Call the cops. The cops show up. Oh, sorry. And they take her to the hospital. I'm worried about her. So I'm just telling the cops whatever they want to hear. They're like, "Oh, what is this?" I'm like, "Well, it's marijuana." We came back from the dispensary. Like, "Well, we need to give you a breathalyzer." I blew a 0-0. I passed the field sobriety test. They were, getting ready to let me go. And then they got a call over the radio that my girlfriend died in the hospital. And so then they had to arrest me, take me down, strap me down to a bed, draw my blood while I'm handcuffed, hands and legs to a thing, and it's like, wigging out, like blacked out because I don't know what's going on. I was just in a car accident, right? They didn't ask me if I was okay. They didn't ask me if I need medical attention. They just gave me a field sobriety test while an airbag just hit me in the face. All this stuff happened, right? Like they didn't care about me. They were trying to get somebody in trouble, right? And so when that happened, I was just like, I wigged out. They said that I told them, I guess I told them to kill me or something. And so they don't take that, they take that very seriously, right? They put you in what we call the turtle suit, and it's basically in the psych ward, and they put you in these big, like, not a padded suit, but close enough, no strings, no way to hurt yourself in it. And they threw me in a room that was for one person, but because of COVID, there's 2 people. So I was laying on the floor in a 1-person cell in a padded suit, listening to some crazy guy while I'm trying to process what's even going on. And, obviously what happened. Nothing can change that, right? I feel terrible. It's something, most people, you don't want to live with something like that. So, anyways, the thing that helps me the most is helping other people. It's, yeah, you can give back. And I feel like by doing that, it's never going to change what happened. But I feel like it makes it a lot easier.
And to hold you account for that shit is just not fair. Like it's one of those things where it's like I know so many people that they're one accident away from that happening to them. That can happen to anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
100%. That could happen to anybody and it just adds insult to injury that he had just lost his mother. It adds insult to injury that she was the one person trying to help him. I mean, like I'm gonna get emotional too. Like this is the weight that people bring to prison that the public doesn't understand. And they don't
I was
see.
facing more time than people that committed murders.
Yeah.
I was facing 12 years with no prior criminal history for an accident. So,
And so to bring it back to what we do, right? Like to bring it back to like a good space.
Yeah.
It's again, like education inside isn't like, okay, you got all that shit in your past, but now we're going to do some math, guys, because I'm a teacher and that's my job to tell you that's important. Like, no. And that's also what people on the outside don't understand about what education serves to do if it's doing it right, in my opinion, on the inside. And I just finished my dissertation on how to train teachers to do this inside prisons, because there is no training for us either. There is no book, except the very few on corrections education. None of them really teach teachers how to do the work that we do. Because you get a master's degree in adult ed and you're like, okay, I know something about adult learning theory, and I'm going to go in and I've got my leadership style figured out and I know how to build a syllabus. That's cute. But you're going to meet a Shawn who just lost his mom and his girlfriend and is doing a bunch of time and has to be reminded every day while he's sitting with people who have murdered people and are doing less time. And he's got to wrestle with that for the rest of his life, let alone while he's sitting inside prison. And he's showing up to my math class today and he looks dejected and like he's not into math. So am I going to punish him for having a crappy attitude? Or am I going to attempt to empathize with the heaviest, like beyond the heaviest stuff I've ever dealt with in my life? He's younger than me and he's coming in ready to pass tests. I've got fireworks ready for this guy. I don't care what his attitude is today. Like this, there's magic potential in this human, not only to get these stupid tests out of the way because they're bullshit, as I've said 16 times, but he actually has the potential to help other people. And maybe if he's willing to do that, that can give him something to live for through today, just through today. If that's enough, then I've done my job. And that's what people don't see. They just think crime, go away, crime, go away. Oh, you came out? I'm not comfortable with that, so I'm going to treat you differently in the workplace, or I don't want to hire you at all, because they have no idea the depth of context and background that leads to a lot of these crimes in the first place. And the fact that he's thrown into the same outfit and the same facility as folks who have been shooting people and doing drive-bys and murdered people. And that's not even to say that those folks don't have the stories and the depth, right? But that we just blanket statement decide you're all just pieces of shit and you're all going to go to the piece of shit pin over here. And that's where you're going to stay for however amount of time. And society's better off for it. That's what we've decided, right? And education can be a beacon for some of those folks. And I tried to capitalize that on that as much as I possibly could for as many people as I could. And when I lost everything, that was the most devastating year for me, and losing my position and closing that facility, it was like, I can't let go of wondering what Shawn's doing today now that he's out. I can't let go of wondering what we could do with the potential I saw. How can we continue to ride that wave and now do it in a way that people can see, that we can come to a podcast and talk about it, right? So that new people can go, I didn't even know this was a thing. It's okay. I forgive you. You're not supposed to know it's a thing. That's by design. But now that you know it's a thing, you can get involved. You can get excited about it. You can be pissed off about the system. You can empathize for Shawn. You can donate. You can volunteer. These are real stories. And the students we help have similar situations, similar heartbreak. And they're trying to pull themselves up into a new identity too. And that's what we're here for.
And something I'm curious too, because like one of the things that I see as a big failure of the prison system is the lack of mental health support for people on the inside, because we're putting them into an environment that's predatory. We're putting people into an environment where violence is celebrated and all this other stuff, but also they're dealing with the trauma of what got them there, the trauma of the justice system, the trauma of police interrogations, all of this other stuff, but we don't provide any mental health support. And I think that would be so huge for people in that institution, because like a lot of that sort of lack of self, like, I don't know how else to explain it other than it pisses me off that it's not even talked about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I feel like Shawn should speak to this more because he has the lived experience as somebody who obviously was traumatized by the quote unquote crime itself. I'm putting air quotes if you're just listening and not seeing it. And then by the two tragedies that he endured, and then also the incarceration itself. Part of my dissertation, I cited several sources in that all unanimously say, like, everybody that interacts with the criminal justice system and the prison system in particular leaves scathed, including me as staff, and of course including the incarcerated and including officers. Like, they are all negatively impacted, if not traumatized to some extent by interacting with that system. There's a really great movie. I think I've seen several about prisons. But I think this one's called The 13th, which is about the 13th Amendment. And I think there's a quote in that movie of a woman just talking about how the system is a monster. It is a monster that you cannot beat. It is a monster that you cannot change. It literally eats people alive. It literally takes lives that, like a Shawn who, yeah, you're depressed and you're going through some hard stuff, but it makes you worse. It makes you worse. And so he could speak more to the mental health piece and whether or not he encountered that. I know there's mental health professionals working inside. It depends on the state. It depends on the jurisdiction. But just like me as a teacher, I had my hands tied, so much red tape. That was my biggest battle, was just dealing with the policies and the rules that got in the way of the so-called mission to rehabilitate. Like, your own rules are in my way, right? And I'm sure mental health professionals deal with that too. So Shawn could probably speak to that better.
Yeah, so the mental health care system, it's not all bad. The problem with the system is so I go in and you get to a place where they house everybody, they classify you, it's Shelton, and then they send you out from there. And it's the hub. And while you're in this hub, they don't provide you anything but emergency medical services. You're only supposed to be in this place for 2 weeks to 6 weeks. Well, because of COVID, I got stuck there for 9 months. I kept requesting for mental health services. I'd been in therapy before I went to prison. I'd been, all this. And I ended up having a mental breakdown after 6 months of being locked down 23 hours a day, 6 days a week. On the 7th day, you don't get out at all. And that's if we got out because of COVID. A lot of times they didn't have enough guards show up, so you don't get to go out. So,
Jesus.
and then at that point, luckily a good sergeant came up to me and said, I could send you to the hole, but otherwise there's nothing that they will do for you because this is not the main facility. He's like, the best I can do is give you a job, get you out of your cell, if that'll help, And so just kind people like that, make a difference. But once I got to my main, the therapy was the good part. The bad part is you go down to the doctor or their quote unquote doctor, and they just go take these pills, and you're like, what are they? And they're like, it doesn't matter. You take these, or it's like, oh, okay, you don't have any other choice. And so I got on all sorts of antidepressant SSRI medications, and now for the first time I've been completely off of them, right? Working a job like this allows me enjoy my job, so it's less stressful, allows me time to think and learn and do new things, which allows me to decompress from thinking about all the bad stuff, right? And working with people, a lot of it too is just conversating and like listening. It's not always teaching. And so there's a lot of things I feel like that go into the education system. And when I was down in the education building, that was a lot better than the mental health services they even offered in prison, because it wasn't just like, here, take these pills. Then they call you every day for pill line, and they go, pill line, everybody line up, get your pills. And it's like, like they're one of the crazy people, like, yeah. So not that I am a big supporter in mental health. And for me, being in the education now is my biggest mental health tool, because it allows me a way to get my anxiety out by doing things and doing numbers, and helping people also helps to make me feel just like I do have a sense of worth, that like, oh man, maybe it's not all bad. And by, help with seeing people smile and make it, it means a lot.
But it just like the thought that just comes to my mind is like, holy cap, is that's a huge HIPAA violation. Come get your psych meds. Like holy shit. I'm sorry, but it's like, wow. Like, God.
Well, so they
It's
used to call them ding biscuits, but then they got in trouble. Yeah, so they used to go and Shelton over the radio, ding biscuits, come get your ding. And then somebody sent in a kite, and then they got in trouble for saying that. So then they had to say pill line.
it's interesting because like the more I talk about to people about this kind of this environment, the more I realize just how common it feels. A lot like some of the experiences I had in the military. Like, for example, like if you were sick and you go to sick call, you're called a broke dick and you're isolated to the side and you're paraded as the broke dick in front of everybody. And so everybody knows there's something wrong with you.
Yep.
And you're treated accordingly. But that's just the way the system works. And so like, how do you change a system that, I mean, Jesus, like talk about the trauma of you having to sit in their line.
Not just the culture.
Can you talk about that just for a little bit?
Gosh, I guess I can try to. So, what I had said, I don't know if the mic picked it up. I said it's not just a system, it's a culture. Corrections has its own culture. Each prison has its own culture. So, for example, I got to go play with my band in the Washington State Pen, and I hadn't been there before. I visited Shelton, where Shawn is talking about when I was in training for DOC. I visited the women's facility. I've been to most of the Oregon prisons, at least on the west side. And each one's a little different, right? Like each one feels different, smells a little different. They all have a smell, and has just a different energy. And but ultimately, like there's a culture when you've done time that you just carry that with you. It's just part. It becomes part of you, even if you can step into a new life and a new identity, probably similar to the military. Like you carry some of that time with you forever. Marines in particular that I know are just like it is built in. It is part of their DNA now, right?
It's not going anywhere.
It's just that you're going to die with that. Like that is become a piece of who you are, for better or for worse. And I've seen that in the reentry population, which is why with the Rebel Academy, I'm like, those are my people. It doesn't matter if you're inside or outside. Once you've done time, and while you're doing time, there's a piece of it that there's a piece of you that the prison takes and replaces it with like, it's like a tattoo, right? It's like, this is part of you now, and you can try to cover it up, but like that ink is there. It's there forever. And inside in particular, like it's a different language. The way you walk makes a difference. The way you talk to people, the way you do or don't make eye contact with other inmates versus other staff. I had plenty of guys, especially older Black men in particular, who would not make eye contact with me in the hallways. And I'd say like, hello, I'd look at them, go, hello, but there's like this unspoken code that like, oh, I'm going to look away and show obedience and respect by not looking at you because you're a female. I didn't know that when I went in. Like I just learned that along the way. There's a culture among the correctional officers. There's a culture among the rankings, sergeants and lieutenants. There's a culture in the non-uniform DOC staff, like the medical staff and the chaplains and all the other folks that work in there. And there's also subcultures depending on your race and the type of crime that you're in for, and how many times have you been in prison, and which other prisons have you done time at, and are you affiliated with education? Like that creates its own culture, and they got questioned and tested in the units by other folks. And can you cheat on this test for me? And I'll give you all my soups and I can hook you up with whatever you want. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on in the units in particular. And so there's a whole cultural piece that, TV tries to kind of crack into that and expose like, okay, like this is why this gang is over here, and this is why they all sit together over here, and this is why this is happening. But really you don't know, because you don't feel those energies until you actually spend some real time with this population. And you feel it in the reentry population too. It's a little different. But it's there. And that's actually something that employers don't know how to really wrestle. They're like, why do you say these specific words, or why do you have this weird boundary around this conversation? And that's a lot of the culture that they have to kind of unlearn or adapt when they're back in free society. It's like going to another country and then coming home and kind of forgetting, you just kind of forget like that slurping is rude here. You go to China and everybody's slurping around the table. I'll never forget just being so grossed out by that and coming home being like, thank God I'm not going to have to hear like slurping on purpose. Just little things, you know, but that have a really big impact. And it's like a class system. It's really like you have to, and Shawn can speak to this, I think, but it seems like people feel like they need to grow out of that or like set part of themselves aside to function in free society again. And that's part of the lift. That's part of the like, how do I be true to myself but exist in the professional legal world as a citizen? That's a identity crisis.
And it's one of those things where it's hard to recover when you've been treated as less than human. It stays in your psyche. Yeah. The whole time. Yeah. And I also like really understand like energy. And so when you have a prison, you also have almost a century now of tormented memories of people that have been treated horribly. And that memory sticks to the walls. And it's also something that you sort of have to sort of absorb unintentionally while you're there. What was the hardest piece about transitioning once you got out?
Learning to deal with people. So let me tell you, you would
Still real for the rest.
100%.
So in prison, there's two sets of rules. You have the prison's rules and then you have the inmate's rules. Okay. If you drop a pencil and it rolls by somebody, you have to say, excuse me, can I grab my pencil? You don't reach down and grab it because then that person's probably going to kick you in the face, right? Like you don't invade anybody's personal space without asking because of the fact that that is not acceptable. That is not, you don't know who that person is, what they've been through, what affiliation they're with, if you're allowed to talk to them. And well, if you've been there a while, you may know better, but especially in the beginning. And then when you get out, you live by a certain set of rules that they hold each other accountable very strictly. And if you break those rules, the consequences are pretty severe in the inmate population. So when you get out, you are now conditioned to follow these rules without ever talking about them because the guards are not allowed to know about them, right? If punishments get doled out by the inmates and you explain to anybody else why this happened, now you are in trouble again, even worse, right? So then you're not allowed to talk about the rules; they're unspoken, and so you get out. And then I remember I went to a Safeway, and the aisles there were really narrow. People were bumping into me. I was in there for less than 2 minutes and I just wigged out. I just pushed my cart and I just walked out. And I was like, I got to leave here right now. I'm about to wig out on some, because people were bumping into me. Wouldn't say, excuse me. I'm thinking, what are they like? Are they trying to fight me? What is going on? Why are they invading my personal space unless they're trying to like threaten me, you know? And so just learning that, oh, people out here that have never experienced that, they don't even understand that they're doing anything wrong, right? They don't know that. They don't know that, oh, if I accidentally bump into you, it's not like, to them, they don't think it's a big deal. But if somebody that's been in prison, that is an insult that will get you beat down if you don't apologize. And if your apology is not sincere. Not just, oh, I'm sorry. No, you have to be sincere. It's like, it's weird because you would think everybody in prison is a wild mayhem, but most people, not all, most of them follow a very strict code of conduct. And that's why people stick to their groups and they do this. So that way the infighting isn't breaking out every day and everybody's in trouble all the time. So that's why the people that aren't following the rules, they send them on the missions to get in trouble because they're already causing problems for their people. So they broke the rules. And now it doesn't matter if they get in trouble by the prison's rule. So there's a lot of this, like, you get out and you're like, oh, that's right, I don't have this subset of rules hanging over me. And so you got to adjust and, keep telling yourself like, oh yeah, they don't know. Like, it's not their fault, like, because otherwise you take things personally, and it's not a healthy way to live.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine that the rules by the inmates are in competition with some of the rules by the guards.
Oh,
right?
definitely, 100%.
How do you navigate those waters?
It's very difficult. I mean, we were watching this TV show, me and my fiance, and this guy told this other guy something in confidence, and then they sit down at the dinner table, and the guy tells everybody at the table, and then I immediately go, "What a snitch!" Right? Oh, that guy needs to get his ass smashed, right? Right now at this dinner table. Then I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Wait, this isn't how real life works, right? And so, there's just this like weird element where it just gets so ingrained sometimes. And because it's just happening all around you when you're in there, and then you get out, and it may not be happening around you now, right? But it's just weird because everybody is so strict, and then you get out and it's so relaxed. It's like you said, it's like the military versus a civilian life. It is so strict inside. Everything you do is watched. Everything you do, you have to learn sign language if you want to communicate without the guards knowing, right? A special kind of sign language. And it's like they force you to learn this stuff because they do not want you to tell the guards information. And if they find out you leaked anything, like let's say the guards come to you and they go, "We saw you here. We know, you have to tell us or you're going down for everything. If you say anything, you break the inmate's rules." Right? There's a lot of rules that they have, and they say, "Well, you got to do this even though you know you're going to get in trouble because you broke this rule, so now you got to do this."
So basically you have to choose between the whole, which is an inhumane punishment by all imagination.
Yep.
Or, oh God, that's a damned if you do, damned if you don't position to put yourself.
Almost everybody that has any kind of serious felony crime that does more than a short amount of time has to go to the hole. They have to go to prove themselves that they're not going to snitch a rat.
Damn.
Yeah.
I want to repeat that statement for people listening because that's the most fucked up thing I've heard in this conversation. If it's inevitable, you have to go to the hole.
Yep.
If you've served enough time. Everybody has gone through the hole. Oh, that's fucked up.
It's a tough one because and the thing is, even if you're not doing anything, if you have a lot of time, people want to know that you are trustworthy in the beginning. And so it's not like, oh, you got 4 years, you're going to end up in the hole. No, the inmates are going to put you in the hole to see how you react and make sure that you're not going to do anything stupid over the next 4 years.
Oh.
Can you imagine learning all of it? Like, can you just try to imagine how exhausting all of that must be when you're already trying to grieve your girlfriend who just died next to you, basically, and your mom of cancer, and you were her caretaker, and oh, now I'm thrown into this place for some number of years. You're looking down a tunnel of years of time. And as you start, like, these are the things that you have to learn. Like, it blows my mind. And then, like, but also learn algebra, guys. Oh, and the food sucks. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot, right? And yeah, I mean, I feel like the silence kind of speaks more right now. That just like let that kind of sink in.
And it's one of those things that just like it blows you away because like because I like to think about like my time in basic training, right? Because the whole idea of basic training is to brainwash you into submission. And the biggest hurdle for me when I got out of the military was beating that mindset of I was beaten into submission. And it was the hardest thing for me to overcome. But I never went to the hole. Like the unwritten rules from the military were exactly the inverse. Like, how do we band together to survive no matter what? I'm going to be there in the trenches with you. We're a family. We love each other. Contrast that with the conversation I'm hearing now is completely different, where like they're pitting people against each other. The system is designed to like not only play these mind games, but they're harmful to people's mental fucking health.
They create a false scarcity to make us fight amongst each other.
Can you talk a little bit about that? The false scarcity?
Yeah, so they will give gifts sometimes out for like lunch, they'll give extra like every once in a while for like football, right? For every Super Bowl, they'll give a Super Bowl pack. Well, yeah, there's supposed to be one for everybody, but do you think everybody gets one? No, because it's they're everybody starts grabbing 2 and 3, the biggest people first, and the heads of the of the crews, and then it goes down in order, and the people at the bottom that can't be trusted or that nobody likes gets nothing. And the cops, they don't really care, like it's easier if we fight amongst each other than for us to, argue with them. So yeah.
Mm. So in a way, they're rewarded for pitting you against each other.
Yeah.
Kind of like a certain type of crime on crime. Again, right? Like, it's not an accident.
Yeah.
What about black on black crime? Like, they're just criminals because they are, and like look, they're killing each other. Okay, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. I believe somebody, and I really regret that I don't know who said this, but there's some quote about how the last step of a genocide is when you watch them start killing each other, which pertains to several different, like, specific racial groups around the world.
Yeah, and because like one of the things that you hear sometimes that I always push back about is that they've chose this sort of lifestyle. And then like, no, I would imagine you 100% of the time, if you were to say, okay, if you're on the street corner selling drugs, here's a job where you can help people and make 150 grand a year, but you would have to give up selling drugs. 100% of the people are going to say, yes, please. I want a good paying job. It'll give me a house. It'll give me a car. It'll give me a life. It's not like people are choosing this lifestyle because it's the most, it's absurd to me that people push back on that and saying, well, it's just the way it is in these neighborhoods. I'm like, well, the way it is in those neighborhoods is because nobody spends the money to lift these neighborhoods up. And it's been the same stories in these neighborhoods for 3 generations. And it's like, we're doomed to repeat ourselves if we don't learn from that. And that is so frustrating.
But you don't know about that because you didn't learn about it in my U.S. history class.
No.
I learned about racism is kind of still a thing a little bit, sort of, kind of, but like that kind of ended with civil rights, and like they got the right, because there were no black people in my class. They got the right to vote, and like so now things are better. And fast forward to 2008 when we got a black president. So like, if a black person being a president, how can there be any racism? Because you didn't read the right books, bro. You don't know how this is built into our society, especially in the United States. You don't think about the fact that black people were banned by law from purchasing property. You don't think about how the wealth is distributed across racial groups in the United States, because you didn't think about that in high school or in any education that you had, where you really had to look at how wealth has trickled down generation to generation. When your parents or your grandparents die in a white family, you're some exorbitant number more likely to inherit, right? Whereas if you are a person of color and a grandparent or parent dies, you have a cost of a funeral. You don't inherit anything. Right? If you look at those statistics and you really start to unpack like the just where money stands, and if you understand anything about economics and how that correlates to opportunity and real estate acquisition and how that relates to opportunity and economic upward mobility, all socioeconomic upward mobility, then it's really kind of an obvious picture. But if you learned in high school, like I did, like all the presidents are great, and like MLK did some stuff, and now like everybody's equal, and well, of course you're gonna think like, why are they committing all these crimes? Black people just must be bad people. Like that's the rhetoric, that's the mindset, and we see that in other podcasts, and that's gaining a lot more traction these days because you didn't read the right books.
And it's also like the opportunity that was robbed from them. And what I mean by that is because we had a period in time where there was a lot of opportunity for wealth. And then we changed the rules and we changed the laws and we stripped millions of dollars from successful Black people and returned them to abstract poverty for no other reason than they were Black. And we're still fighting against that because it has generational impacts. I think one of the things that I was talking to somebody the other day, it was on this program, the lady that started the Black Joy movement in Oregon. All she does is go from city to city and town to town and try to celebrate Black culture and inform people that what Black culture is and how to celebrate it and sort of embrace it. She still gets phone calls from racist people telling her that she shouldn't be doing Black Joy events. And so it's not like this is something that happened in the past. No, it happens today. And the system is built to where if you are a person of color, the implication of innocent until proven guilty sometimes doesn't frickin' exist. And how do you fight against that when the system has already said, oh, you're guilty. We already know you're guilty. We know we can win this case, so we don't even care if it's legit or not. And then your whole life is frickin' decimated because of one frickin' thing. Ugh. Ugh. Mm-hmm. So we've been at this for like an hour and a half already. And I think I want to close with like on a positive note because I appreciate what you're doing. And one of the things that I would like to sort of talk about a little bit, especially as this pathway to diploma that you're talking about, is because I learned from you yesterday that it's in Washington State, but anybody can access this program. How does that work?
Yeah. So it is a Washington State program, but we, being the rebellious bunch that we are, have established the only pipeline that I'm aware of specifically for reentry folks. So it theoretically could eventually be anybody. So I have to correct you there. It isn't anybody yet. It has to come through us and we have to put in a referral and we can support that student. But because of our mission, we're starting with the reentry population. So somebody who has been sitting in GED classes in prison and has been trying and they can't pass the test, but they have like what Shawn was talking about, like he's got students who are showing him like, I can do all the things, but they go take the test and they can't pass it because tests, right? That they get out of prison and they don't have a GED finished. They can use the tests that they have passed, if any, as credit. And Shawn said something earlier that if you pass an official test, it counts. The partnership we have also counts practice tests. So if you passed a practice RLA GED test, that wipes out all your English credits for your high school diploma. If you had all your English credits already from high school, the GED, whether it was 3 or 4 credits, depending on your graduating class, all fill into electives. So it counts somewhere on your credit count towards a diploma. So that's really, really big. So if you had some tests finished and say you just didn't have the math, and let's say you have all your credits done except for those math credits, which if it was 2014 or before, you need Algebra 1 and Geometry. You can come to us, the Rebel Academy. We can go over which program is better. Do you want to do a GED? Because for some people, that's fine. It works fine. Great. Do a GED. If you can't get through the test and you want to do a diploma, we can put you in the diploma track. We plug you into our partnership with Washington. And even if you live in Oregon and even if you're remote and you can't get a tutor directly to work with you in person, they can help you remotely through us. And you can go on and earn your high school diploma through the Rebel Academy's partnership. Right now, we have 3 students already, like in the last week, they've started popping up and they're like, how come I don't know about this? I'm like, because you live in Oregon. Sorry about your luck. Like, our legislator hasn't figured out yet how to replicate Washington's model, and or they don't know that it's the way to do it. I actually don't know. Like, my next career step now that my doctorate is done is to try to go to Salem and be like, hi, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing? And we copy Washington on a lot of things. Why haven't we copied them? Because that program works. At Larch, when we launched High School Plus and Shawn was there and we had like an army of tutors helping, including him who helped pioneer High School Plus at the time, our graduation rates went from 15% when I started in 2016 with just GED graduates to 85% in 2023 when the prison closed. It was you had to try really hard not to graduate by the time we were done. And that was for 3 reasons. The tutors, number one, the fact we had so many and they created, I was talking about the culture earlier of corrections. We created an education culture at our prison. And it's a damn shame they closed us down because we had the best graduation rate in the state because of the tutors, first and foremost. The second most important reason was because students had a choice. In a place that is devoid of choices, they got to us and I said, "You want to do a GED or a diploma?" And they went, "I need you to pick for me. I don't know how to make choices. I don't know how to make decisions." Because prison, right? Because they've been told, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. So having either track, and most students chose the diploma route because it circumvented the testing, the big scary monster test. And third, because we had reduced class sizes, they shut half the facility down in 22. And then, so we were running at half capacity. Our class sizes were smaller. So it was almost like 1 tutor for every student or 2 students. That's like a teacher's dream, right? To have a small class where no student is waiting for help. They're all getting their needs met. And because of that model, we were graduating the vast majority of our students. And so again, knowing that works, Shawn is the only tutor of the 5 that we have who has worked with High School Plus specifically. And so he's really going to pioneer and train the other tutors once that really starts to gain traction, which it now is. And that will boost our graduates on the outside. And it again, true to the rebel cause, right? Like we're going to create an underground railroad to diplomas since it's not offered here. But now the students who are least likely to follow through and finish a GED have another way.
And the last question I have for you would be, Shawn, would be if you could have told yourself anything or what you would like to tell people who are just about to get out that would help them be successful, what would that be?
Well, maybe 2 things. One, in regards to education, man, I didn't think anything would come out of it, and look at where it put me now, right? I mean, I'm mentally probably sharpest I've been since probably my entire life. And I'm much happier than I've been in a long time as well. Just being in a position where, number one, I like my job and I get to work with people and see, smiling faces. So, even though you may not think education is important, it actually opens more doors when you get out than you think. Because now you're not just a felon, but you also have a GED or a high school diploma. So when you go to do a job application, you can at least, you have to put down that you're a felon, but you also get to put down that you have a high school equivalency, which opens more doors than, if you didn't. And especially if they see felon, if you don't have a high school diploma, good luck these days, right? So even though it may not seem important, I didn't think it would do anything. And now I'm so glad that I did it because it opened so many doors and put me in a position where I don't have to work 16 hours a day in the mines, pretty much is what we called it, but I was inspecting parts all day and it was hard. It was a very intensive labor job. And now I don't have to break my back every single day. So, and the other thing, if you already have your education, right, just like I said, you got to remember people on the outside don't understand what it's like. You have to have a degree of like forgiveness and compassion to understand that they don't, because you think you're automatically going to assume, why don't they just leave me alone? Don't they know that this is how things are supposed to be? Because they don't know. They've never been to prison. And you need to, and that is when I was in T4C, got the most people when I was going down to my probation, I've got the most people in trouble. They didn't know how to just forgive somebody for sliding them on the street because that's just how we were trained inside. And so just try to give yourself enough to recognize that people don't understand, and that it's going to take time. I mean, 2 years later, a year and a half, almost 2 years later, now there's a lot of habits that I thought I could never break that I've broken and I don't do anymore. There's those things that, like she said, are kind of ingrained in me now, that I watch a TV show and I see somebody do something, and the first thought that goes through my mind is, oh, that guy needs to be beat up. You know what I mean? Because that's how we handle it. Like, I didn't do that, but I didn't want that happening. But that is just like, if I don't go along with it, then now I'm the problem and I get beat up. So I don't have a choice. And it's like, oh, I've never been in a fight in my life before I went to prison. So, it's, yeah, when you getting out, it's an adjustment period. And initially it feels like you're never going to make it. Feels like everything's against you. You have to jump through a million stacked hoops and they're pushing your buttons. But if you don't let them get to you and you just do the best you can, they can't keep you forever. So, yeah.
And I guess the last thing that we'll wrap this up, how can people get more information about the Rebel Academy?
Yeah, so the obvious place is our website, therebelacademy.org. We are on Facebook. I think we're also on Instagram now. Thanks to Hannah for making that happen. If you go to Facebook, it's The Rebel Academy, I believe is what you look for. Shawn's actually wearing our logo. So if you look for, it's actually in purple. So the little Phoenix Eagle situation. We're also on YouTube. So we don't just help folks get a GED who are coming out of prison or who are justice impacted. We'll help anybody get a GED. In particular, the diploma route, like I said, we're trying to pilot like a small group first. But if you're high barrier, low income, you've been doing GED for a while, we can still have a conversation about what does a diploma look like for you. Especially if you got most of your high school credits. That's easy. Like, you needed half a credit. Oh my God. Like, please get a hold of me. You can contact us at contact at therebelacademy.org. And because we are remote, we offer remote tutoring. We're accessible for anybody in the country who wants or needs a GED. We have a YouTube channel that is finally getting updated. It's awesome. We have Palmer House Productions up in Renton, who has graciously donated their time to put together professional instructional videos where I'm teaching most of the math concepts. There's an algebra course, geometry course. So if you go to YouTube and you just need some math GED help for free, you can find us on YouTube looking for The Rebel Academy. Again, look for the purple bird. And then if you find that you also need a tutor, you can contact us. Our tutors can use more hours. We have one female tutor now. Finally, her name's Adrienne. She's fantastic. Shout out to her. She wanted to be here tonight and couldn't make it. We've got Shawn, we have Tim, and we also have Tom. And we also have our translator, Christian, who I would love to get him on your show. He is such an inspiration. He was a graduate, finished his GED with us, and then because he's bilingual, I was like, I want to hire you as a translator. So he helps our Spanish speaking students and tags along with right now it's just Tim to help we have 2 Spanish speakers right now who desperately, like, I shouldn't say desperately, but who rely on Christian to translate. And so all of them are ready to help folks of all ages and walks of life. And they're the last people on earth to judge for an addiction background, felony, criminal background. I have a student right now who cheated on his GED tests, and he's banned from taking tests for a year. And he's ready for them. So I'm like, high school plus it is. Like, you're the diploma guy. And he's justice impacted too. He's done some time. He's done a little jail time. He's very young. And I'm like, we are your people. I don't care that you cheated. You're not going to have an opportunity to do that again. But we're also not here to judge you, because everybody involved on the team, except for me, ironically, has done some time. Like, we've made mistakes or been in accidents. And so that's what we're about. We're about the second chance. We're about propping you up and circumventing the barriers that are stopping you from the upward mobility that you're looking for.
Well, Lauren, Shawn, thank you so much. And I'll end the podcast the way I always end the podcast, folks. Be kind. We all live in the same planet. We breathe the same air, and this world will just be a much better place if we treated everybody with dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thank you.